Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel, Nady the Coder. Today we're going to be talking about variables in JavaScript. How do we create variables? What are variables? And so on. Before diving into the lectures, please make sure that you watch the previous lectures in order to follow along. Let's just dive into the lecture. Variables. Most of the time, a JavaScript application needs to work with information. Variables are used to store this information. A variable is a name storage for data. So basically, let's assume that you have a box and then you label that box and name it a container, and the data in this box is called the value of the container. So basically, this is the way a variable, and this is how a variable looks like in memory. We can use variables to store data. So if you have some kind of information or data that we want to save, so we basically make use of variables in any programming language and store the data in that variable. We normally use a let keyword for creating or declaring variables. So let's just put our hands on and create our first variable. So we already have wrote some code right here in the script. So we'll just get rid of this and clear everything up for you guys and save it. So as I mentioned in the lecture that we have to make use of the let keyword over here just to declare our variable, and we can name a variable anything. For example, we can name it name or anything that you want. For example, a username, or we can say, okay, let's make it name for now. And I can assign any value to this. For example, I will just assign it John Doe. So basically, this is the data of that variable that is being assigned to this variable. This is the variable name actually, and this is the keyword that let us declare a variable. Just for your convenience, for demo purpose, we can just console log or print this value, or let's just better make use of document function for now. Document.write, and then we can just write our name to the document. Don't worry about this function, we'll study more about and talk more about this function, what is document and what it really does. But for now, just think about it that it prints your value on the screen and in the browser page. So I'll just save the file, and when I refresh, you can see John Doe. So John Doe is basically coming from the variable that we stored the data on. So yeah, multiple lines declaration of a variable. So here we are talking about different approaches of how we can declare a variable. So what I did is I just declared it in a single line. So we can also do this. For example, I first declare the variable and then I can assign a value to this. So this is the same thing that I did in a single line. So this is called multiple line declaration of a single variable, and I'll still get the same value over here. We have single line declaration that we just saw how we do that, and then we have multiple variables and a single line declaration. So by what we mean by this, we mean is, for example, I have multiple variables and it has certain values. For example, we have first name, and then it's called John, and then I have a last name that is Doe, and then we talk about age and eye color and all that. So you can see that we have multiple variables over here, and they are separated by comma, and all of the variables have their respective values, and we just wrote the let keyword over here just once, so we didn't repeat it. So we can also write it like this. For example, some people prefer for the better readability, they just write it like this, and it will still work. We just have to get rid of this for now, and we can just print the values over here, first name, this, and then we can also do the last name, and we can save it. And when we do this, John Doe. So yeah, it's working perfect. So this is how we declare multiple variables in a single line. but this is not recommended for sake of better readability. Go for multiple line declaration. So if you really want to declare multiple variables, just start them with their own let keywords and just get rid of the commas for now. So this way it is more readable rather than writing it on a single line. And I'll just do let iColor, and then when we save it and refresh, we'll get the same result over here. So this is how we declare the variables. In older scripts, we used var for declaring variables. That will be discussed in the later, but for now, we can just quickly see what is a var. So basically, var is same as let keyword. You can declare a variable with that. For example, I'll do middle name, for example, middle name. And I can do it, for example, Dante, and I can just print out the value of the name. So it is same like the let keyword, but let is introduced in the newer version of JavaScript, and before that we've been using var for the declaration of variables. And you can see John Dante, the middle name and the first name. There's a slight difference between let and var. We'll discuss that later in the lectures, later lectures, and see what is really the difference between these two. By updating the value, the older value is removed from the variable. So what happens, for example, I have this code, I have the first name and then the last name. What if I do something like this, for example, Smith? I now assign a Smith value to this. Since we already had a Doe value in this variable, now I assign Smith to this. What happens if I print it? So if I do, for example, last name and save it, you will see the newer value. So what happened here? So by updating the value of the variable, the old value is removed from the variable. So if you put a new data into the variable, into the container or box, the old value will get rid of it. It will not be over, concatenated or something like that. It will be just overwritten. We can also declare two variables and copy data from one into another. This is a really cool thing. So for example, I have another user that has a name. For example, we can say, for example, a user that is a name. I want to use the last name from this variable. So what I can do is I can assign this last name to this user variable, and this value will be copied into this user variable from last name. So it's basically the value of this is Doe. So this Doe will be copied into this user variable, and we save the code and just run it and refresh the page. You will see that Doe is printed since we are just printing the user variable over here. You can see that we can copy value from one variable into another. Declaring a variable twice triggers an error. So for example, within this code, if you declare a variable with the same name, what happens? So for example, I declared a variable with the same name. The variable names are the same. The value could be anything. For example, I can put anything over here, and but since the variable names are the same, it will just show me an error. But my VS Code is so smart that it's already showing me the error. But if I save it, I can see the error in console as well. So this is basically why we are opening the console, and we can see the error in the console or the debugger. You can see the error over here. It says identifier first name has already been declared. So on line number 23, so you can just go to line number 23 and you can see, okay, first name has already been declared. So within this scope, you cannot declare variables with the same name. So yeah, that's the case. Also, declaring a variable. So how do you actually declare a variable? Name of the variable must contain only letters, digits, or symbol, dollar, or underscore. You cannot use any other special characters like asterisk or percent or hash or anything like that. First character must not be a digit. we normally use camel case, and also there are different patterns of writing your naming your variables. So let's just go through one by one and see what there it really means. So for example, we just talked about that we can just use a name, letters and numbers. We cannot use, for example, star and our variable name. We cannot use, for example, another special character like parenthesis. We cannot use, for example, hash or something. The only allowed special characters are underscore and $sign. So you can start it from that, but you can also make use of numbers over here within the variable name, but you cannot start your variable name with number. So that will cause an error. So if you want to write a number within your variable name, you shouldn't be starting it with a number, but just you can start with a letter, or you can use these special characters, $sign and underscore, and name your variable. So if I just print this value out and refresh the page, you can still see the value. So those are the only valid special characters. Otherwise you can just use the characters or numbers. Case matters. So this is something special. For example, if I have a variable name that is called first name, and I have another variable that is called, for example, first name. So basically we pronounce it the same way and looks the same, but they're not the same because this case, their letter written in a lowercase letter and it has been written in the uppercase letter. So the JavaScript is called case sensitive, so the case matter basically. So if it is written in the lowercase, this is written in the uppercase, so there are two different variables, they're not the same. So yeah, non-Latin letters are allowed but not recommended. For example, you can use some Russian characters, you can use some Chinese as well. They're allowed, but it's not recommended because an international convention is to use English in variable names. So if you want to declare your variable names, you must be using, or is this a standard? It's not really a requirement, but it's better for readability and all that. We have some reserved keywords. So keywords that cannot be used as variable names because they are used by the language itself. For example, let keyword, constant keyword, variable, clause, return function, all those are reserved keywords. And what are reserved keywords? Those are the keywords that cannot be used as a variable name because they're used by the language itself. So these are reserved in the language itself, so you cannot use them as a variable name. Assignment without use strict. So you need to define a variable before using it. Literally in old times it was possible to create a variable by a mere assignment of the value without using it. So for example, in the old JavaScript we could do something like this. For example, create a variable, assign it a value, and then console log it, and it worked. But you should be defining it. We'll talk about the use strict in the later videos, so we'll better understand it later. So yeah, let's just keep it for now. So we should define a variable. Just keep in mind that we should define a variable before using it. If we have not defined a variable, we must not be using it. So yeah, let's talk about constants. Variables declared using constant are called constant. The const keyword it is used for unchanging value and cannot be reassigned. So if you have some value, if you have some kind of variable that the value is always fixed and your code is not changing the value, then we must be using constant for that. So uppercase constant. So for example, is this quickly see how we can declare a constant. So we use, unlike the let, we use const, and we can name it anything. For example, let's say age, and we can assign, for example, 100, or we can name it anything that we want, for example. And Yeah, this is how we declare it. The thing about the constant variables are that we cannot reassign a value to it. So for example, if you do something like this and then save it, and for example I want to print the value of the age variable, and I'll just refresh the page, you can see assignment to a constant variables. What it means is you already have assigned a value that you cannot reassign a value, you cannot assign another value, you cannot update this variable because it's of a constant type. So you're declaring a variable with a constant keyword, so it means you cannot do this. It's totally incorrect. All right. So uppercase constant. What are uppercase constants? There's a widespread practice to use constants and as alias to difficult to remember values that are known prior to execution. For example, const my birthday and stuff like that. So there is a convention. For example, let's talk about why do we use the uppercase letters for constant variables. We don't necessarily need to use the uppercase letters for that, but in some cases, for example, if you want to write your birthday, just like for example mine, I would write my birthday is this, and then I can say, for example, 29. So instead of writing this again and again, I can just name it, for example, birthday, or my birthday. I can name it anything, and this is the convention, for example, for a complex value, so it's easier to remember, and that's why we write it on top of our code or define it before we execute the code. So this is how we write the constants. It's easier to remember, it's meaningful, and prone to less errors. Good practices on variables. So variable name should have a clean, obvious meaning describing the data that it stores. Variable naming is one of the most important and complex skills in programming. It's obviously like if you want to write better name your variable, like you'll be writing up hundreds of variable name, and you'd have to decide how to name your variable. A quick glance at variable names can reveal which code was written by a beginner versus an experienced developer. Use human readable names like username or shopping cart and all that. Stay away from abbreviations or short names like ABC. Stop using that variable names like ABC that doesn't have any meaning unless you really know what you're doing. So that's it on this lecture. We have talked about the variables and all that stuff. I hope that you have learned something new in this video. Please like and share this video, subscribe to the channel, and make sure to press the bell icon for future updates. And until then, I'll see you in the next lecture.